Is anybody in here? Oh, hello.
Sessions right from the outset of when we were first all affected. But now thinking about having lots of conversations with clients and friends about how to pivot and how to help our respective constituents. And so today I have the wonderful, very easy job of introducing two wonderful colleagues and experts. So in 1 second, I'm going to turn it over to Greer and Robert. Greer, as some of you know, is a colleague of ours at the Angeletti Group. She is an outstanding consultant, a great friend, and has a lot to say in the area that we're going to talk about today. And in the event that Greer wasn't enough, we've got another colleague on the line with us, Robert Wahlers. And Robert and I have known each other for many years now, both in consulting and client partnership. And he is one of the nation's leading experts in gift planning. His award-winning speaker, written 3 books, professor at Columbia's School of Nonprofit Management. And again, so I'm really pleased, Robert, that you're willing to work with us in this on this session. And without further ado, let me turn it over to Greer and Robert.
Well, good afternoon. We're excited to be here. I know I've known Jay and Greer a long time, and pretty exciting to have a chance to collaborate on sharing some information. As Kate said, we've all been at this for, gosh, 10 weeks. It feels like a lot more, but certainly exciting to be able to be with you this afternoon and to share a bit of information. Our first slide focuses on the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. That was the $2.2 trillion relief bill that made its way through Congress. And no matter what your, politics, it's certainly interesting that it was something that all parties thought best for our country. There were some things that were positive for nonprofits, as you see, some opportunities for SBA loans, a chance for folks to keep employees on the payroll through June 30th. That is a helpful thing. There's a hope that the loans will be forgiven and that the loans will in fact become a grant. The chance that payroll tax credit was helpful there for each employee, and something that is exciting, that is beneficial to some of the nonprofits. And then one of 3 positives for nonprofits on the giving side, they increased the cap on how much corporations can deduct from charitable gifts from 10% of taxable income to 25%. So that was quite a nice change to the positive. And then also the limitation on deductions for food donations is helpful as well. So any of you that are involved with food banks, or I know on the healthcare side, we've had a number of folks make donations of food to the frontline healthcare workers, and that is a pretty neat gift in kind. On this next slide, you'll see that, of course, many folks did get a cash payment of up to $1,200. It's probably most exciting for us on the annual giving side that even if folks didn't itemize, they can still get a cash gift deduction up to $300, $600 per couple. So many folks that don't often make gifts, they say, oh gosh, I don't have a chance to get a benefit from this. Clearly they have a benefit now with a $300 gift, which for multiple folks, the masses, if you will, if there is outreach on an annual giving appeal, you will see some opportunity for up to $300 or $600 per couple. It is interesting that what was normally 60% of AGI, you now have a tax deductibility up to 100% of your adjusted gross income. So for folks that do itemize, there is an opportunity for them to get a full benefit from their donation. And then similarly, there's some interesting opportunities as it relates to retirement plans and withdrawals. The required minimum distribution is something that actually might be a deterrent to giving. While that had been helpful for us with the IRA rollover and the chance for us to do some things as it related to encouraging folks that were in retirement to avoid their requirement minimum distribution and make a donation directly from their IRA to your charity, they now can defer that in essence to 2021. So that is off the table and not necessarily something that is going to help us in this year. But let's talk about some things that could be positive as we go on. So on the next slide, just wanted to acquaint everybody with some of the basic things of gift planning that should be done by all charities. I know over my career, I've learned that there's really 3 stages of gift planning programs in nonprofits. A stage 1 program is one with gifts that don't cost anything today, and any nonprofit should be doing this. There should be an opportunity for us to ask for gifts from wills, and I encourage you to use that word, wills, and not the word bequest. Wills is a lot friendlier for your donors. If you talk about bequests, that sounds legal. There's studies that have been done that say, hey, if you talk about asking for bequests, you'll get less of a response. So a helpful tip, a pro tip for you is to talk about and ask for folks to make gifts from their will, or you could say estate plan, and that kind of lumps in some of these other things. Retirement plans often is a good thing, again, because of the required minimum distribution. That may not be as sexy in 2020, but it still is something we should consider. Life insurance policies. I've been doing a lot of work of late, learning about the life settlement world and a lot of what you can do with the universal life policies that were sold at a time when interest rates are high. And now that interest rates have been low for so long, many of these policies are going to lapse. In fact, 90% of your donors will have a policy lapse without ever hearing that they could have done a life settlement. And sometimes the life settlement can be very good for your charity. So it's something to consider as an option. But even the basic idea of someone making a donation of their life insurance policy, naming you as the beneficiary, a great way for folks to make a gift that really doesn't cost them anything. Payable on death accounts, transfer on death accounts. Certainly we have bank accounts, we have investment accounts. Folks can name your charity as a beneficiary, and those are great ones. And then probably the neatest one on this list for current times, those high net worth individuals that you talk to that have already put money in their donor advised fund, there's an opportunity for them to transfer dollars from those donor advised funds to your organization, and you can do quite well. Again, most charities have a stage 1 gift planning program, and 80% of the gift planning revenue that comes in is in one of these types of forms. So something to bear in mind. This is always helpful, but we'll talk a little bit more about how this is even more of a benefit now because of COVID-19 and what we're dealing with. With a stage 2 gift planning program, those are gifts to meet personal planning objectives. So we need to be very donor-centered in our conversations with donors about why they might want to make gifts. Instead of, talking to them about the charitable remainder trust and how they, could help the charity, you want to talk about how they can increase income in retirement. That will lead to a better conversation with your donors because it's more about them and their needs. Perhaps they want to provide for an elderly parent or loved one. I'm sure many of us who have an elderly parent during these times are concerned about their health and how they're staying safe and sheltering at home. This is something that'll be on the mind of our donors. Helping to pay for college. I've got one who's a rising senior, And I have another who's a graduating high school senior. Certainly college is on my mind. If a charity comes and talks to me about how they might be able to help me pay for college, I'm going to listen. I certainly have very definitive bills that if you've got a way I can help the charity and also help out my children, I'm happy to consider that. But charitable gift annuities and charitable remainder trusts are clearly two of the vehicles, the tools that we use for those three areas. But notice that I didn't talk about the product. I didn't try to sell them on an annuity or a trust. We were talking about donor-centered concepts, increasing income in retirement, providing for an elderly parent or a loved one, paying for college. Being donor-centered is very helpful. Similarly, gifts to maximize inheritance. People want to know that they can pass their wealth on to the next generation or even to future generations. So using wealth replacement trusts, charitable lead trusts, those are neat things that'll be helpful for them to consider. Charitable lead trust, often talked about, very rarely utilized. Maybe, gosh, a tenth of all trusts are charitable lead trusts, but pretty neat that during these low interest rates environment, charitable lead trusts can be a really neat thing. Imagine someone who's not thinking their stock portfolio is performing very well, or their interest rate because in their overall portfolio isn't performing well. If they put that into a trust, they in effect lend the interest from the trust during this low interest rate, get a deduction to offset all of those opportunities and those gifts, and then later on the money can come back to them, or even better, pass on to children so it can avoid some tax. So some interesting things to consider there. But again, those are ideas in a stage 2 gift planning program. The stage 3 program, which is our next slide, is all about family wealth planning. So I saw we have a few financial planners and asset managers and other professional advisors on the call today. And it's interesting to note that there's so few stage 3 programs out there, really only the Princetons and the Harvards of the world, the very sophisticated universities and some of the really high-end charities have delved into this area where they're bringing up family wealth planning to all of their donors. But really that talks about integrating all of their philanthropy and their tax, estate, and financial planning, and working in partnership with advisors and having the family at the table, being able to gather a few generations and talk about family succession planning, talking about business succession planning and how this works. This is for the very top of the high net worth individuals that might support your organization. So we're talking about those 1%ers that are often joked about, but they are in fact the true philanthropists. The gifts of the complex assets here are very exciting. Business interests, closely held stock, collectibles, hedge funds. Folks that are motivated to move on with their life to that next stage will still likely want to discuss this even amidst COVID-19. So it's something that we would want to consider. So we talked about stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 programs, and you might ask yourself, hey, where do I fit into these? There's an opportunity to maybe see yourself in 1 or 2 of these, and I know at the Angeletti Group, the expertise that they have is allowing you to really elevate your program, help it to evolve to that next stage, and being able to, enlist some of their expertise is pretty helpful. I know that I've spent time with some nonprofits, and we've talked about different ways they can go from a stage 1 to a stage 2. It's not hard to do. It takes some effort, it takes time, and it takes a little bit of investment, but it really is about your will to want to do it and to really move it to another level. It's pretty exciting that there's no time than like the present to really move into more of a gift planning program, because if you looked at the surveys out there right now, most people aren't too sure about what's happening in the near term. Heck, our government might not even know what's happening in the near term. But you ask people, hey, what do you think about the future? You know, where will you be in 5 years, 10 years? And they're like, hey, I think things are going to be better. We'll get through this. They'll find a vaccine. We'll be okay. And that is the idea of what plan giving can help with. It will allow you to talk to people about future gifts. And if they're not so crazy about writing the check right now for whatever concern they may have, maybe they employ a number of people and they're concerned about just keeping the doors of their business open. They're not going to be inclined to write the check. But if you talk to them about a future gift and you have the opportunity to earn their pledge now, that allows them to make their gift, still support your organization during these times, but have a gift for the future. I know there's some additional things we can do, and Greer, I know you have some great ideas as it is to really help the organization that's maybe looking for a 1.5 or a 2.5, just a little bit more of a help. So Greer, I know you want to add that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robert. So there are two components that a lot of people do not think about when they're talking about their plan giving program. So Robert talked about kind of the structure of what kind of vehicles a particular shop or an organization can execute depending on the stage they're in and what's appropriate for their donor family. The next two slides, these two components, you can integrate regardless of where you are. You have to at least have stage one, but it comes at plan giving from a more of a refining angle. So this is beyond the vehicles. The first part is involving your donors. So most people think, well, I understand how you have a capital campaign cabinet in a campaign, and they're a group of interested donors who are helping guide the mechanics and the strategy of the campaign. I understand that, but plan giving is so complex and so different, and many of the donors are much older, and how could you ever involve donors in that besides inviting them to your annual recognition dinner or whatever event that you have for that. But what we have created is a way to in a meaningful way to involve donors. So, and that is by establishing a planned giving council. Now, this is not a committee that is assigned busy work. This is also not something that is an ad hoc of the board necessarily. It is a much elevated group that gathers, and it should be made up of both some current plan giving donors and also some prospective plan giving donors. And that's really the beauty of it, because you go through this process with this group and they make a series of decisions. But as they're making these decisions, you've got people who are already firmly in your camp as plan giving donors. But then it's just such a beautiful and elegant way to cultivate some really key prospects as they better understand how plan giving can help them, how it is already helping their peers around the table, and helping the organization that this council is a part of. So identifying, just the process of identifying who should be on that council is an endeavor. You want to have the right people at the table, and you also want to make some decisions like, are we going to have kind of a founding group that is for the first year, and then we can add on as needed? Or do you want to keep it open for a couple of years? That depends on the level of elevation you want to give to it. But then this council meets probably quarterly to help with the things that are important to them. So how do we recognize plan giving donors? What is meaningful and important to them? How do we market plan giving? And so, well, why don't we ask a marketing expert about how to market plan giving? The reason we're asking the donors is because that's exactly the group to whom we want to speak. So what better than to ask them how they would like to be spoken to? It is a key component in much of advertising. Is you ask your clients and you ask your customers, what do they want? How do they want to receive information, or what do they want to know? And this is a much more refined, high level area that people don't often think about. How do donors want to be spoken to and communicated with about these sometimes complicated giving vehicles? So they work with the organization on recognition components, marketing policies around plan giving practices. And as you're going through this, you can also find out maybe someone really is a sophisticated donor, but they really don't know why a charitable lead trust would be a great choice for them. And it can be an education process for that individual as well. Plus, you're getting to know these donors, they're getting to know each other. And in plan giving, there is no better, if you will, marketing tool than by mouth, word of mouth, from individuals who have made an investment in a planned gift and who are of that age, and they talk to their peers, their friends, their neighbors, the other guy or lady at the club, because there is definitely, and we know this, a sense of, if I don't really understand it, I might think I have to be a millionaire in order to make a planned gift, or it's too complicated for my asset pool, or it's too complicated, I have a big family. And involving them and understanding is an absolutely fantastic way to be able to communicate them, because what better advocate is there, instead of a staffer or even an executive director, than a fellow board member or a fellow donor who says, I did this and it has absolutely been fantastic. I feel good about it. The organization feels good about it. So it works at a multiple different levels, and it's not onerous to the members of the council. You're basically doing all the work for them. They're making a few key strategic decisions when they come together. Plus, they like to come together. I worked with an organization once, a hospital foundation, and had an elderly gentleman who was probably about 90 at the time. And every meeting, he would come to every meeting, and he would go to his Bible study, and he would go to church. Those are the three things he left the house for. And he would come to the hospital for these meetings, and every meeting he would ask me, I don't understand, Greer, why am I here? I'm a small business owner. I'm not a finance guy. I'm not on Wall Street. I don't understand. I said, well, you're a leader in the community, learning about these vehicles. Your friends are here. You're a leader in the community. We really want to hear your voice. So we went through this whole process. This is about a year and a half. And at the end, the gentleman made a $2 million planned gift to the hospital foundation. We didn't even ask for it. He just did it because it clicked in his head. Oh, I get it now. This is how this works. And I can still support my family and still have generational wealth while still leaving this planned gift of $2 million to the hospital foundation, which is my favorite charity in my town, in my hometown. So that's just one example of how this can work without being hard-putting or aggressive. It's a natural process that's actually really kind of interesting and cool to watch. The second, and this is the next slide, the second kind of refinement part, Kate, if you could move the slide, that'd be great. Ahead. Is involving.
Are we on the right slide or?
Oh, yes, we are. I'm sorry. Yes, we are. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. The second point of program refinement is involving professional advisors. And this is a far more flexible arrangement. Professional advisors, don't want to come for quarterly meetings necessarily to your organization, but you don't have to meet with them. As long as you get their buy-in and they're okay to be listed on this advisory council, if you will, of professional advisors. It works both ways. You can call on them, and I've done this multiple times, you can call on them to enlist their help on complicated gifts, where maybe you're not going to execute the gift, but if you just get the go-ahead from them, you can then point the donor in the right direction with their own attorney. And they're glad to give you 10, 15 minutes of professional help to better the organization. But it also works both ways. If their name is listed on your website or listed on your materials as being a professional advisor of note for this organization, that does well for their own reputation, as many of you who are on the call know that. And there's a give and take. I've worked with very outstanding professional advisors who really don't talk about philanthropy a lot because they weren't quite sure what the best way to do it was. And so you can also have that conversation with them to say, now a professional advisor, when they're working with their client, they can't say, if you're interested in charity, you should give to this hospital, you should give to this school or this museum. They can't say that, but they can say, for example, here are a myriad of organizations in this community. Here are 3 or 4 that you might consider, or some like that. And this is how the gift could work. It is very important to let them know that they are valued advisors, and also to kind of vet them and this is actually something that your council, the Plan Giving Council, can also help with if you're really going into a deep program. It's a real nice symbiotic way. And then if I've had this happen, a donor comes to you and says, I'm new to town, or I switched my professional advisor, or my second home is my permanent residence. Can you make any recommendations? Well, you really shouldn't recommend one professional advisor. You should say, here's a list of at least 3 that, what falls into your wheelhouse. Do you want a male, a female, young, old, on this side of town, who specializes in family, inheritance, whatever is your need. And then you can make those recommendations. So this is really a deep, if you will, value and kind of a resource for the organization, but also a resource for the professional advisors. When you go even kind of the next step, that would be to even offer continuing legal education credits, continuing CFP credits, and that you definitely need the help and assistance of some professional advisors and a group of advisors who can come with that and help you and kind of host the event for you and give you tips on that. That gets a little bit more complicated, but if you feel like that would be the next level, I would say if let's say you're stage 1 or just starting stage 1, if you are kind of ramping up and you get to like your second, third year and you're really feeling comfortable with what your staff can move in and out of and is nimble with for plan giving, they don't have to be a pro, but they can just have the conversation. And then you've established a plan giving council and you've got your group of advisors. Then you can kind of vet that question. Should we begin a program where we offer 1 or 2 CLE events a year? And that can be a really great way to partner with your advisors and also to further educate your donors. I've had many plan giving donors who come to those CLE credit, and they're not getting a credit, they don't want a credit, but they're further educated on some of those vehicles. And it's been my experience that those continuing legal education and CFP, those are not, many of them, it's like an ethics component, or it's something that would be appealing to donors. It's not too technical for the group. So those are 2 ways of involving just yet another level of program refinement for your plan giving. And as Robert said, this is such the ideal time to be talking to your donors about plan giving. And I'd like to give just 2 examples from 2 of our clients right now, 2 very different clients. A hospital foundation, I think is on the line, Ken Cole, and then from a botanical garden client that we have. So this is several weeks ago, while we were just about a month in, talking about, well, we can't really ask assertively for major gifts, but do we have any planned gifts out there that really need some finalization or some, kind of closure? And so we looked at that, and there were 2 gifts one from each of these clients. One where we knew that there was going to be a significant portion of an estate given to 3 or 4 charities, and my client was one of those charities. We knew that the amount was multi-million, but we didn't know exactly how much. And the remaining spouse was still alive and still very active. And again, this was in stone. This trust, this will was in stone. The money was coming to the organization. So you're not negotiating, is it going to happen, is it not going to happen? But we wanted to offer naming opportunities so that surviving spouse could, if she wanted, potentially utilize that gift that we knew was coming for a significant naming opportunity in an ongoing capital campaign. So that's one example of being able to work in this environment, but still be able to, raise money. And the reason we say raise money is because that gift had not been counted yet. And so the ability to be able to quantify it, solidify it, and be able to count that in the campaign along with the naming opportunities is extraordinarily significant. Similarly, but a little bit differently, there was a donor about 10 years ago at a botanical garden client of ours who died and left $250,000 for a specific use. That gift was executed, but he also set up a trust, and it's a charitable remainder trust that the stream of income now goes to his daughter who has some disabilities. And then at the end, it will be split 4 ways. One of the botanical gardens get a significant amount, probably in the neighborhood of $1 million. Now, the gift has not been counted. It is in stone. It has not been counted. But also the daughter was unaware that the gardens are in a capital campaign or that there's any kind of any exciting things going on. So we reached out to her with the advisor's okay, and sent her a proposal for this gift that's coming, regardless, that she could honor back her parents while this campaign is happening, and have a naming opportunity in the confines of that campaign. Even if you're not a campaign, that is a possible vehicle to use. But those are just two examples of why plan giving is so important in this environment. And also, as Robert said earlier, it's a conversation that just feels much more comfortable right now, because you're talking about something significantly in the future. You're not talking about taking any assets away, current assets, and you're also allowing them to be involved in the organization and any projects, for instance, if you're in a capital campaign. Okay, I'm going to move to a question, one of the first questions that was submitted to us online before, and it is: describe the documentation process you recommend to small not-for-profits for recognizing and counting deferred gifts from donors in their estate plans. One of the first things that we like to see is just a very simple, it's really a letter of intent or statement of intent that has some of the specifics of donor information and the specifics of the gift, and also, if appropriate and if they're comfortable, giving the page or 2 pages that is appropriate from their estate documentation that indicates that said, your charity, your organization will receive this particular designation. If, to the best of their knowledge, they can designate give a value to it, an approximate dollar value, that's also helpful. And if it's a percentage, is to give, what is that approximate dollar value based on their current value of their portfolio and their assets. And that way you can have at least a sense of what that, might be. They sign that. Of course, you can have language in there that this is irrevocable or it's revocable. And then if you need to meet with their professional advisor, always open that door. If they increases their comfort level, I am absolutely a fan of making sure that you have a good flow of information with your professional advisor, with their professional advisors, because if they're a part of the process, then when the donor passes away, it will be a far easier process, also with the family, if that's appropriate. So that is the first question. The second question, I think Robert and I are both going to answer together. So with the new CARES Act, what are the best gift options to suggest? And for some donors, that might be a rollover, from their IRA. For some donors, that might be an outright gift because they itemize and they can get that full tax break. And again, planning. All types of plan gifts are good to discuss now. Robert?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's, as we said, a great thing for us to be encouraging at these times. There is every reason to offer the options to your donors and the flexibility. Even if they make a pledge of a cash gift, give them time to pay it. Allow them the opportunity to, make the pledge now and pay the gift later. But even better for you to talk about the plan gifts where there's an opportunity for them to make the pledge now and pay it much later. We haven't yet mentioned, and I want to make sure we bring it up, the idea of a blended gift where you ask them for both cash now and a deferred gift. And that is certainly gained a lot of favor over the last number of years. That has even surpassed major gifts and plan gifts alone. The combination of those two, a major gift and a plan gift, is really exciting for a charity where you've got someone making a gift now that helps the program in the near term, but then maybe endows the program for your organization long term by having the gift come later. So those are great things to consider. I certainly think, as we mentioned, the idea of appealing to the masses and getting donor acquisition through some sort of e-blast, direct mail, type of appeal is helpful because so many more people now can get a $300 deduction even when they don't itemize. The government is allowing that. So it's a smart thing for us to be able to talk about that and to really catch that large net to see that you might gather more donors to your organization. And we know loyal annual donors are usually our best planned gift donors. So to bring in more people who maybe have admired you from afar and haven't made a gift, get them into the fold, get them starting to give regularly. And, you know, the consistent giving, that loyalty, then that makes them a really neat group for you to talk to about perhaps including you in their will or offering a beneficiary designation as we talked about in stage one.
Okay, we've got another question. With the existing, this is a little bit overlap with the existing markets and COVID-19, what planned gifts, which ones should we encourage the most? Robert, you want to?
Sure. I think, you know, certainly as we talked about the idea of doing a charitable lead trust, that's exciting right now with the low interest rates environment. Again, that's probably your more sophisticated donor, your high net worth donor. They might see that as a benefit. I always like the idea of talking about gift annuities. If people don't feel like they're getting a good rate, if they're concerned about the volatility in the market, the safety of a fixed rate that is a contract between your charity and the donor allows them some comfort to know that, hey, at your age, you're going to get 5%, 6%, perhaps as much as 6.5%, 7% if they're quite a bit older and a donor. That can be a great conversation. I know there's some folks on the call that I've known from my time in the New York metro area, and they've done that quite well when talking about their organization to donors. And I certainly think that's still a good conversation to have. And beyond that, Greer, if I could jump in, I love what you were talking about with the donor council and how that can really be a great voice to help in your program planning and what you're doing. But let me also add on as it relates to the Professional Advisor Network. I was fortunate some years ago when I worked for American Cancer Society that they had their own national professional advisor network, a place to really inform donors that in turn would come back and help the charity from time to time by recommending ideas to their clients. I took that on, and at the last 3 places I've worked, I've made sure to establish a professional advisor network that was really there for a couple purposes. One, as you mentioned, they become a resource of all the expertise as it relates to all those complicated gift ideas that we might need to get into. Secondly, they have clients. They've already done the marketing to build their client base, and many of them have the very clients that will support your organization. I've been very lucky that by establishing some of these relationships for the right reasons, by meeting folks that appreciated the mission of the organization I represented, we were able to come to some mutual understanding and to establish relationships that led to win-win situations for their clients, our organization, and them professionally. And then, quite frankly, they love to network with one another. And if we can be the conduit to that, that puts us in a great place to really help to grow charitable gift planning across whatever your demographic is for your nonprofit. If you know the attorney and they want to meet the CPA and you can introduce them to the CPA, how neat is that you make that connection? You build that bridge for them. That just leads to some great opportunity for them business-wise. And then I've not ever seen that not come back to help. And then lastly, as it relates to advisors, many of the advisors who I've done work with have become donors in the organization. Just recently in the current organization I represent, one of the attorneys made a $50,000 gift. Another attorney made a $100,000 gift. They're both members of our advisor network. They're both getting active in the group. At our one annual meeting, as I think Ken Cole had suggested, it's a good idea to have a semi-annual or annual meeting. We talked about the mission of the organization, and we went around the room and asked if anybody had a situation where the health system had helped them. Every single advisor in that room had had some circumstance where they had been helped in some way, either themselves personally or their child was born at one of our hospitals, or one of those things came about that was pretty exciting, that they actually felt the passion of the mission almost as much as we would do representing the organization. So if you're in healthcare, no time like the present to talk about your mission. Cancer isn't canceled because of this COVID-19 situation. Cancer patients continue to be helped. Cardiac patients continue to be helped. And now many hospitals are getting back to the elective procedures that were only elective due to the fact that the date was able to be picked, not that they still didn't need the surgery. It was still necessary. So those kind of things are still there for organizations. I know. Oh, go ahead.
Here's a real specific
Sure.
question about the gift annuities.
Yeah.
Lower charitable deduction for CGAs. How about the effect of the very low discount rates right now, and also the possible change in payout rates by the American Council of Gift Annuities in July? And Ken, who's really great, answered back, lower charitable deduction, yes, and lower payout than before, but donors find the certainty appealing, especially in light of market's volatility.
Exactly. Yeah, Ken, you can say it better. I mean, certainly it's all about the consistency, the safety that our donors feel by having that. All charities that are doing the right thing abide by the American Council on Gift Annuity rates. We all make sure that we are following what we should as it relates to that. That keeps us all even as far as the rate goes, unlike the insurance industry where they are competitive on annuity rates. Gift annuities don't work that way if you're not aware. We all use the same rates. They do fluctuate, as Barry mentioned, and that is just the case. So you're able to offer what you can offer. It's very important to abide by that so you don't get a portfolio that adds more risk to your organization. There's a number of folks that I know the Angeletti Group and I have utilized in the past that help you to audit the risk of your gift annuity portfolio. So by all means, be mindful of that. You don't want to go off the chart and offer higher rates because eventually, that'll come back to hurt you. So important to have a very diverse pool for your gift annuity so your risk is low. And it's a pretty neat thing that it does still offer that safety and security for our donors.
And Robert, I know we talked about this before, that often when you're beginning a gift annuity program, that you really should have at least in the neighborhood of $500,000 of a pool. So that could be five donors at 100,000, or it could be 20 donors. It's just that you really probably, based on the resources needed to establish it, should not start with one donor. But if you've got a donor, keep them and then try to get some additional donors to make that initial reduces your risk.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. Just about any charity that dips their toe in the gift annuity water is going to do well to market the concept. It is in the books that Brian Sagristano and I wrote, the only product we tend to quote unquote sell, in that you want to get the word out that they're being offered by your organization. I still have always liked the idea of making sure that we lead with donor-centered language. So talking about how you can increase income in retirement is one of the best ways to then lead into a conversation about gift annuities, or to provide stability during this current situation is a great way to lead into the conversation about a gift annuity. But you should very easily be able to get 10, 20, 30 of your donors interested in gift annuities with just a little marketing, just a little opportunity to talk to them about that. Too often, plan giving is the redheaded stepchild of fundraising. And it's quite often the case that it is the first thing that the CEO or the executive director of a charity wants to cut as it relates to marketing, because it's like, oh gosh, if we spend money on this, we're not going to see any results this year. We won't see any results next year. Well, I can tell you, the person that spent money on marketing for planned giving 8 to 10 years ago is now seeing the latency of those gifts and is getting those gifts during this market and during this time, because those gifts are now maturing now. So just like having a balanced portfolio, you don't want all your money in cash or bonds or stocks. You want it spread over multiple things. The same thing should be true of your fundraising portfolio. You need to do some annual giving, certainly major gifts, and then planned giving is something to invest in. It is always going to be there, and it often brings your best results from the investment you make in it. It isn't something you need to spend a lot of your time on, but a little bit of time each week will yield dividends to your organization. Do we have
Okay.
maybe just one last question or a closing comment from Jay before we close?
Any questions?
We had a few of them along the way, and I've been trying to answer them in the chat. So hopefully folks have been in there.
One I'm going to bring out
Sure.
that you already answered, but it was a great question of the size
Yes.
of the Planned Giving Council. What should you shoot for? That's a
Yes.
great question. As with a capital campaign cabinet, you should be in the 8 to 10 range. You want to have enough people that you've got some synergy. But if you're missing a couple people, you don't want to have it feel like an empty room. What we always land on, though, is yes, that's the range. But if you have 12 people and those are the perfect 12 people to be on that council, then you have 12 people.
Yes.
If you have only 7 people and those are your 7 people, then that's okay too. But if you can kind of aim for that 8 to 10, that'll give you healthy discussion and they'll enjoy the camaraderie amongst themselves as well.
Sure. And to follow up with that, Greer, taking another question from the chat, and you already answered it with, I think, the first question we had from the person from Illinois. But Dan Dick had asked about best practices for recognizing and counting revocable, and I'll also include irrevocable gifts. Really, in planned giving, it's very important that we do a number of things. There's counting and there's accounting. And you need to be sure to count your gifts so that you encourage those gifts. So while you won't necessarily get all of your revocable gifts, it's important to recognize the donor who's thinking of that as a means to make a gift. You then need to steward it so that they'll see that gift to maturity at some point in the future. You also want to recognize your fundraiser on your team that maybe worked with that donor. And that recognition is important for not just the donor, but then also the staff person who spent the time with them. So recognizing and counting on both sides is important. But then the irrevocable gifts, we can officially count as it relates to accounting purposes. And that goes a long way to allow your organization to plan for the future if you know there's an irrevocable trust that you can expect. If there is dollars that are coming your way through a life insurance policy that will, for a donor that's in their 80s, that will likely be coming your way in the next 20 years or less. So those type of things are important in the process, but I always want to emphasize that you need to count and account. And you certainly do want to pay attention to the revocable gifts as well as irrevocable gifts, because you'll want to make sure that you still encourage any type of gift, thought early on so that folks will see it through. Many people change their will 8 times during their lifetime. Your organization wants to be in the last will. And that's certainly the right place to go to.
Great.
Wonderful.
Robert, Greer, thank you very much. Very helpful. Thanks everyone for the spirited chat back and forth. I see that some of you also not only asked but answered some good questions. For those of you who asked, as a couple of you did, the slides will be made available. We're grateful for your participation. We're grateful for all of your good work. We look forward to talking with you and seeing you soon, and wish you the very best, and stay safe and stay healthy. And thanks so much again for participating. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.